Well, Mike, we're back here on Review to talk about the first two Bill and Ted films. And of course, the most famous lines from Bill and Ted are, "Be excellent to each other and party on, dudes." And which is ironic because these days, no one's excellent to each other and people continue to party on even though they're told to stay home.
That's true. Social distance, dude.
So the Bill and Ted movies.
Yes.
Did you grow up with these? Did you watch them a lot as a kid? Okay.
More so the first one.
I think that's the case with most people.
Yeah, although the second one's great.
I like the second one more, and we'll definitely get into it. But it's interesting because the first one came out in 1989, second one came out only 2 years later, and yet one is super 80s and the second one is so 90s.
Super 90s.
And there's only 2 years between them.
Hey, those are important 2 years.
I guess. Although technically the first movie was actually shot a couple years earlier than that.
Yes.
It was shot in like 87, I think, and then there was all sorts of, the production company like went bankrupt or something and it sat on a shelf for like 2 years. So it was more mid-80s, but still drastic difference, especially if you watch them back to back.
Yeah, well that makes sense to me because I had a couple of questions. I of course watched Excellent Adventure so many times. And the Bogus Journey a lot, mainly starting from the point where they die. I always like that. They're very creative movies.
Yes, surprisingly creative.
Yes.
Because you think of it as like, oh, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. That's the dumb 80s teen comedy, which it kind of is, but not really.
It's dumb on a surface level, but in its construction and conception, it's kind of brilliant. To me, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure was and I don't know if I'm right, I could be wrong. After the massive success of Back to the Future, somebody made a phone call and said, start digging through your drawers for a time travel kind of script.
That's incorrect.
The script was written before Back to the Future.
It was. They were starting to get the movie together, and originally it wasn't. They didn't travel through time in a phone booth. They traveled through time in a van, because they're a band, and bands have vans. And then Back to the Future came out when they were putting the movie together. They said, we should probably change that because people are going to compare it Back to the Future. We need to come up with a completely original time travel device, a phone booth. I guess Doctor Who was not very well known in the States at the time.
They said, no one's going to think of that.
Yeah, no one knows this Doctor Who.
Well, it's interesting too because the openings are very similar. It involves a garage, guitars, and an explosive mishap. And there's even a shot of a cuckoo clock in the opening of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. They're doing their wild stallion thing.
Yeah.
And that's when they realize that they got to get to school.
Oh.
Damn. I'm late for school. Uh-oh. We're late. For what? For school, dude.
That's weird. I never even really thought of that. I guess after that, they go in pretty different directions.
Yeah, they're different concepts. But I always thought that Excellent Adventure was like a, what do we got? Oh my God, this massive hit called Back to the Future came out in 1985. What do we got? Let's start this into production. Some stoner-esque comedy about time travel. Let's rush this into production, and then it happened to work.
Yeah.
Because you've got your big watershed movies that always have their series of knockoffs that follow. Your Matrix.
Yes.
Indiana Jones had 45 knockoffs come out after that. Big movies. Terminator.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because Bill and Ted started as the characters came before there was any sort of idea for a movie. It was written by all the movies, including the new one that's coming out, are written by Ed Solomon and Chris Matheson. So I just recently discovered Chris Matheson is the son of Richard Matheson, writer of I Am Legend and tons of Twilight Zone episodes. And so it started. It was just their characters that they created in like an improv class or something, and what ended up, it's funny because they don't play the characters in the movies, but I think the reason Bill and Ted have kind of endured is that they're just so like effortlessly likable.
Yeah.
And so affable and so positive about everything.
I wonder if after we're married, the princesses will stay over with us. Yeah. Our girlfriends are most chaste.
Yeah. At least they're not dating our dads.
Good point, dude.
So it was the characters first, and then it was, well, what kind of situation can we put them in? Because the movie starts out, it feels like a kind of 80s comedy. They're in school, they're not great, and you know, they're flunking their history class. It feels very like typical 80s comedy. And then it goes off in this bizarre time travel direction.
Yeah.
That it's sort of like taking characters from one type of movie and putting them into a different type of movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're likable comedy duo. Mm-hmm. They're like a classic comedy duo.
Yeah. Well, they're interesting too, because you mentioned like surfer dudes. They do the 80s surfer type talk, but they're not surfers.
No.
They're not potheads.
Right.
They're not losers. We never really see anyone like picking on them at school or anything.
No.
They're kind of just in their own little world. That's what I like about them.
Yeah, that's very those typical elements that you would put into a screenplay are missing from this. Like you said, there's no jock that pushes them up against the locker that they hit with the phone booth at the end of the movie.
There's no villain.
There's no villain in the first one.
In the first one.
Yeah, other than the villain is time. It's a ticking clock kind of situation, but there's no one actively trying to stop them. I would say the first Bill and Ted movie has a little bit of middle of the movie problem. Both of them do. They have great concepts, great executions, with the exception of some dated visual effects. And I think, I mean, typically, you know, your comedy duo, you might have like kind of opposites, your odd couples, your C-3POs, your R2-D2s, your Abbott and Costellos, and the characters. They're funny in the fact that they're so similar to each other.
Sounds good, Mr. the Kid.
Like they finish each other's sentences, they say the same things. They're so much alike, which is odd because you don't have one that's, you know, they're like the same character.
Yeah.
It's just really, it's different.
But even when they get mad, it's very brief, and then they make up immediately.
Yeah.
Like we have Missy, the Ted's stepmother, that graduated 3 years before him and now is married to his dad, and Ted's giving Bill a hard. Did I say Bill or Ted? I get them confused because they're the same character.
Well,
Bill,
also the confusion comes.
Well, and then in the sequel, she marries the other one's dad.
Yes.
I can't believe Missy divorced your dad and married mine. Shut up, Ted.
But Ted is giving Bill a hard time about it. Remember when I asked your mom to the prom, and they're angry for like 5 seconds? He says, "Shut up, Ted," and then Ted just smiles and they go on.
Yeah.
Your stepmom is cute, though. Shut up, Ted. Remember when I asked her to the prom? Shut up, Ted!
Yeah, they don't hold grudges. They don't get mad. they let things roll off them pretty easily. They're very likable, but they're dumb.
Yes.
And that's the concept. The concept is two dumb California, I call them surfer dudes.
Well, that's the type of the lingo and stuff.
The Southern California dialect.
Yeah.
All their sayings. They don't say bodacious. They don't use surfer slang. They almost have their own.
Yeah.
And it's the idea that these dummies have the ability to gather up historical figures.
They go on this grand sci-fi adventure.
They go on this grand adventure, and they learn a little something along the way, sort of.
Thanks to great leaders such as Genghis Khan, Joan of Arc, and Socratic method, the world is full of history.
Welcome to the future. San Dimas, California, 2688. And I'm telling you, it's great here. The air is clean, the water's clean, even the dirt is clean.
But yeah, so Bill and Ted are graced with a time-traveling phone booth from George Carlin, who's in the film barely at all.
It's funny, I always think of him as being like the third lead. And
Yeah,
he's
and he's not.
barely, not in the first one a lot, and definitely not in the second one a lot.
Yeah.
That opening, though, with him talking right to the camera with just that pure black background. That was something that was added later because they're like, maybe we need to give some more context to what's happening in this movie. So they put that up front, and that whole opening was written by George Carlin. Which, when you know that, it makes sense because some of the things he says, he had always had such a like specific way with like language and specific references.
Bowling averages are way up. Mini golf scores are way down.
But that whole thing was added later.
And the material's never taken very seriously. And a lot of times it doesn't make any sense.
Well, you talk about like the time travel rules, because it doesn't matter.
Time travel rules.
It sets up the rules that work for the story, and that's all that really matters.
Yeah. Most important, no matter what you do, no matter where you go, that clock, the clock in San Dimas, is always running.
They can't take their time traveling phone booth, you know, back to 1901 and sit there for 6 years and write the greatest speech at their high school auditorium has ever seen, read 150 books on history, and then travel back and just read it.
Yeah.
They can't do that because the San Dimas clock is running.
It's always ticking.
And then, you know, it's like, hey, how do you fit all them people in the phone booth? They solve that problem for one scene when the phone booth is horizontal.
Yes.
And then the next scene it is not. And they fit 14 people in the phone booth. And, you know, they fix the phone booth's time travel antenna with bubble gum. It's a cartoony, silly movie.
Yeah. But it also works. We're talking about the likability of Bill and Ted. Both of these movies, they're like buddy comedies, but then they also work as like ensemble comedies.
Yes.
Because in addition to Bill and Ted, they're going through time and gathering up all these historical figures, and everyone gets a funny bit.
Yeah.
Almost everybody gets something funny to do in the movie.
Yes.
Without it being like overshadowing or leaning on it too much.
No.
Like, I love Sigmund Freud. The first time we see him, he's smoking a cigar. Later in the movie, he's got a corn dog.
I'm Dr. Freud, but you may call me Siggy.
Oh my God.
As an 11-year-old, I didn't get the corn dog slowly losing its erection when Billy the Kid and Socrates are hitting on teenage girls at the mall. Sigmund Freud comes up.
Way to go, egghead.
What is a geek?
Hey! Jokes you don't get when you're a kid. Sigmund Freud was obsessed with the penis. For those of you who don't understand, I always have this like blanketed idea that no one knows what we're talking about because everyone is stupid. They don't know who any of the historical characters in the movie are.
Abraham Lincoln. That's Lincoln.
I know how to spell Lincoln.
You know what's always bugged me? I get the swaparoo with the phone booth and the van. That makes sense. Like, I don't know how much they changed the script. This is news to me, and it's interesting because the beginning of the movie, they have this weird like crystal thing that's coming down from the ceiling, which is the time travel device. And then it conforms to something more appropriate in the era that it's going to.
Yes.
You know, so like, I don't know, if you're going to the 1800s, you would probably be a horse and carriage. So that's your time travel device.
Something that'll blend in with
something
the time
that'll blend in with the. But yet, when the phone booth lands, it lands like in the middle of the parking lot. Like at the
with people looking like
at the Circle K.
Yeah,
it should just land like flush against the building, and then just be like, okay, that's it.
Yeah.
But if what you're saying is true, that originally was supposed to be a van.
Yeah, you can have them just drive up. That's very normal.
And a van just appears in the parking lot, and so they didn't work around that.
Yeah.
So that makes sense to me now.
And it's hard to blend in when you see the thing like shooting up into the sky or down into the ground.
Yeah.
Which they do very seldom. I noticed that. That's some creative filmmaking because it was a moderately low budget movie.
The first one, yeah.
The first one. The second one, not too much higher, but a little bit more. But you rarely actually see it like shoot into the ground or land.
Yeah.
It's always like you see people's reaction to it happening. Or you see like the light from behind the door, I think, when they get Abraham Lincoln. It's like, I always working around the fact that they don't want to deal with these fucking visual effects.
Yeah, that's fair.
Directed by Stephen Herrick, who we previously talked about on our Critters episode. Same director as Critters. That was his first movie. This was his second.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did he go on to have a prolific career?
I think he does lots of TV stuff now.
Boring.
All these directors that did like 1 or 2 big hits in the 80s, they just do TV stuff now. They all direct like 1 episode of the Hawaii Five-0 reboot and shit like that. But speaking of the low budget, there are a lot of moments in the movie where the seams kind of show.
But where are we, Rufus?
Austria, 1805.
And we cut to this glorious stock footage of a war. Doesn't match at all.
I don't know how they know where to go.
They always, well, that's part of the comedy, is they always end up exactly where the famous historical figure is.
Yeah.
Which leads to some funny parts, like the montage when they're collecting people and
Yeah.
Beethoven's playing piano and he's the only one in the room to not hear
That's hilarious.
not hear the phone booth land.
Yes. And
Or like, again with the low budget, we see Abraham Lincoln in the Oval Office and it looks like an SNL set or something.
yeah. They just open the door.
But it's fine. It has that kind of ragtag charm to it.
Yeah, it's fine. When they get Joan of Arc, she's praying in the church, and they just appear on the altar, and so they trick her into thinking they're God. If you don't know, Joan of Arc, she got burned at the stake for being a heretic. And that's one thing that they don't do. We got to return all these historical figures.
No, the story's over. It doesn't matter now.
Joan of Arc.
Maybe we shouldn't take her back.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't take Abraham Lincoln. Don't go to Ford's Theater. And then we ignore the butterfly effect. We ignore all that stuff.
All that
it's
matters.
Just fun.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just fun.
It's a comedy and all.
Fun.
It's a comedy, and all that matters is that they pass their history report.
At least they show Genghis Khan was a horrible rapist at the beginning.
He's eating like a giant turkey leg.
You know what's fascinating? I was watching something or heard somewhere somebody did one of those DNA tests, and they're like, "Oh, I'm a like a 15th generation descendant of Genghis Khan."
Oh,
and I'm just some white person, and there's so many distant descendants of Genghis Khan because he fucking raped.
Oh my God.
So much.
Wow.
The Mongolians, when they went around and just slaughtered and pillaged and raped, they created so many DNA lineages.
Oh my God.
It echoes into today.
But in this movie, he's just a wacky guy that fucks up a sporting goods store.
Yes.
Played by Ali Ong, who's been in every movie, every action movie. He's in Die Hard. He's in Big Trouble in Little China.
Fried Green Tomatoes.
That's my favorite action
film. The one that fries the tomato. And Jane Weedland.
Jane Weedland from the Go-Go's. I think it feels like an idea that was only like half realized to cast lots of like music people in the movie, because Jane Weedland plays Joan of Arc, and Clarence Clemens, who I'm not too familiar with, but I know he's a musical artist. He's the head of the kind of future council, those 3 people that are sort of floating there, and I think that's it. As far as musical people.
Yeah, they bring in, Primus is in the sequel.
Well, the second one has more musical
and
stuff,
they bring in, like, the Faith No More guy.
Yeah.
What a shithead.
It's interesting, from 89 to 91, like, that's that transitional period from, like metal, like hair metal, and to alternative, with Nirvana and all that, kind of like the alternative wave that started. So it's like 91, it's like, but Bill and Ted are metal. They're not going to be like, oh my God, the Screaming Trees. Oh my God, Pearl Jam. It's like, what do we do?
Wild Stallion's music has become the foundation of our whole society.
No way.
The backstory of these 2 characters is that they will someday go on to write music that will inspire and unite the world. And by the end of the second movie, they still don't even know how to play instruments.
Well, that's incorrect. Did you rewatch these, Jay?
I did. I know at the very end of the movie they travel through time so they can learn their instruments.
Yes, which contradicts the clock is running
yes.
Idea from the first one.
We'll talk about the third act of the second one. I got things to say about how it gets pretty sloppy.
It gets pretty loosey-goosey.
It does.
It's just it's a free-for-all.
Yeah. The first one sets up its rules. It adheres to them well enough for a comedy about California surfer dudes collecting historical figures so they can pass a history exam.
It is the only movie with reverse, double, triple reverse fish out of water humor.
How's it going, Old West dude?
That's what I wanted to mention too. Yeah, you get fish out of water stuff with them going through different historical periods, and then all the historical figures in their time.
Times, yes.
They milk as much as you can out of that.
Want a Twinkie, Genghis Khan? Say please.
And have we ever come up with a term for? There's fish out of water, of course, but there's dark, imposing, serious, villainous, bad character who ends up wacky.
That's the Chad Vader syndrome.
Yes, Chad Vader syndrome.
Which is a dated reference now, I think. But
But where you take a character like I'm jumping to Bogus Journey, but where you take a character like the Grim Reaper and you make him do wacky things, instant comedy, just like Fish Out of Water.
Yeah.
Napoleon at a water park, or eating a big thing of ice cream. It's Napoleon.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's Napoleon. It's funny because it's the Grim Reaper.
Although Napoleon isn't doing anything funny, he's reacting. He remains serious, but out of context, that's what makes it funny.
This is what they call a Napoleonic complex.
Oh, okay.
But no, that's a different thing. Nobody knows what that means. But there are a lot of charming, fun moments in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. One of my favorite moments is when Ted falls down the stairs in a suit of armor. Bill runs down after him and sees him get stabbed. Goes through this whole thing of, I'm going to avenge you.
It's very emotional.
You killed Ted, you medieval dickweed!
And Ted appears from nowhere and hits the guy with a giant turkey leg. And he's, oh, wow, I fell out of my suit once I hit the floor.
You're alive! Yeah! I fell out of my suit when I hit the floor.
It's still completely intact in the shape of a person.
It just makes me laugh every time because it's so absurd. It's so cartoony. It's so logical. It's just funny.
Yeah.
It's funny in a way that, it can't be specifically defined.
Sure.
It's like,
the situation makes no sense, but then also Keanu Reeves' delivery. He's so excited to explain to Bill what happened.
Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves are both, brilliant.
Yeah.
In playing dumb.
Hi, Mom. That's your mom, dude. I know.
How's it going, boys?
To that, I will transition into my cynicism mode.
Oh.
Where I say that I absolutely hate the idea of the princesses.
You hate that? They barely factor into the movie.
I feel I've often made a case for the not gays. And I just hate that.
Okay.
When that studio mentality,
they gotta have a love, especially in the 80s, I suppose.
Especially in the 80s. And
they take care of that with just one line of dialogue.
1 3-letter word. Contextually speaking, you have high school students in 1988. As far as dated stuff, that's the only thing.
Yeah.
Bill and Ted don't rape anybody. Other than that one thing, it's fairly holds up, other than some of the dated music references and all that.
Put them in the Iron Maiden.
Iron Maiden? Excellent!
Execute them.
Bogus.
It is nice that Ted has a younger brother, and they kind of pawn Napoleon off on him. They're like, keep an eye on Napoleon while we go gather other historical figures. So it is nice to have that kind of cutaway throughout the movie to their little adventures, just to break things up a little bit. And I don't know if you noticed, they take Napoleon to like an ice cream place. They call it Ziggy Piggy. And well, first of all, going back to the low budget, the little button that they put on him looks like it was made with the Sharpie. Well, that's like the cheapest prop. But they filmed that in a Showbiz Pizza that they slightly, changed things around, covered up the logos. But there's a little surprise cameo.
I wanted to say, isn't one of the waiters somebody famous?
Well, the two waiters are the writers.
Okay.
They have a cameo in the first movie and the second movie.
Okay.
So in the first movie, they're the guys that work at the ice cream place. But if you look behind Deacon on his close-ups, they covered up all the Showbiz Pizza stuff. But our little friend, the Showbiz Pizza Bear, is out of focus on the wall behind Deacon. So.
Oh my God.
So what I'm saying is this movie's cursed. So you mentioned before the climax of the movie takes place, they're doing their history report in a giant auditorium, but that whole ending was a reshoot because the original ending took place just in their classroom that we saw at the beginning of the movie, and they just usher in all the historical figures into there, and they just kind of sit on a table on the side while all the historical figures talk about who they are. And I don't even think they finished shooting the scene. They shot like half a day, and they were like, this isn't going to work at all.
No, you got to go big.
So even though it's unrealistic that they would have a big, auditorium, make a whole big spectacle out of these history reports, for the sake of a movie, it was definitely beneficial because it's very visual, it's very creative.
Yep.
And I like the little line from Bill when he's like, I just have a little Oedipal complex.
Nah, just got a minor Oedipal complex.
Yes, that's hilarious. No one gets that joke either.
I noticed during that scene too, I don't know what the story is behind this, but did you notice a lot of the people in the crowd are like eating like pudding cups?
Yeah.
I'm assuming there was something involving pudding that got cut. I don't know what the backstory is with the pudding cups.
Maybe Alex Winter knows.
Yeah, Alex Winter, tweet at us and tell us why everybody has fucking pudding cups.
The ending, that was the wisest decision in the history of cinema.
Yes.
To move it to a big auditorium. And then, it's like, I don't know, they show up, they grab all their historical figures. The clock is running in San Dimas. They get there just in time. The teacher's about to, whoa, we only had one more report. Yeah, like he says one more.
Yeah.
Like Bill and Ted are one person. They're different students.
Yeah.
They never said you could pair up. Everybody's doing their singular reports.
Yeah.
But Bill and Ted, they're one person.
Well, that's a funny thing throughout the movies too, is that they're always a pair.
Yeah.
Like in the Bogus Journey, there's the good robot us's and the evil robot. They're always a pair.
That's why you got to give them. You
The
got to
not
have
gays?
the doctor come in and certify them with a case of the not gays. Because if you didn't have those princesses, and you have two guys that don't have dates, that don't have girlfriends at the high school, that always hang out with each other.
They should have had Sigmund Freud diagnose them, and he would have just said, not gay.
Whoa. But yeah, so that's why I hate the princesses. They suck.
They turn out to be a part of bands.
It's 80s.
They're so unimportant that they completely recast them in the sequel and nobody noticed.
Yes. The princesses have been recast more times than the Griswold children. And nobody cares because they're not characters.
Right.
They suck. They are props to say that Bill and Ted are not gay. It's a small blight. It's like a sunspot. The picture of the sun.
Yeah.
That is a sunspot. A bright, luminous object that provides light and heat to the solar system. A little sunspot. They ain't gay! Okay, we got it. They don't need to meet princesses. So, after the success of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, We move on to Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, which is Orion.
Yes.
And this was not.
I mean, the first one had issues with like who owned the rights to it because the company that produced it went bankrupt, and then it got bought by another company. So I don't know how it ended up with Orion, but Orion had a couple of really big hits, and then they went completely bankrupt. I guess that's a running thing with the Bill and Ted movies, is that the companies that make them go bankrupt. Goo. Who's putting out that new one? It was the last film produced by the Weinsteins.
So, given a little bit more money to make a sequel, what do? The sequel theory, the sequel problem. Do you recreate the first one? You put a little different spin on it, and that's what they did.
I would say that's not what they did. The easy thing to do with Bogus Journey would have been to, we got to go through history again and get
well, that's what I mean. Put a different spin on it.
I mean, they put such a different spin. I mean, time travel barely factors into the movie at all. I think this is one of the best sequels ever made in terms of concept and going in a completely different direction.
Structurally, it's basically the same.
I guess. It's the same but different. It's very different.
It's a good sequel. It's a good sequel. Like, some sequels can be repetitive. And this one, like, because you have kind of, there's a lot of new creative elements to it. But it kind of is the same thing where it ends up at the big event at the end. And, you know, again, very similar. Back to the Future. There's doubles at a concert.
Yeah. That's true.
There are people hanging from the rafters.
Well, Marty McFly was just crawling across the
crawling, but he was hanging. There's a duplicate of Marty McFly.
That's true, yeah. That was something I was always impressed by as far as visual effects from that time, was like in Back to the Future 2, when there's two Michael J. Foxes in the same frame, and they do a lot of that in this movie, too. I was always impressed by that. Yeah.
There's a wonderful little moment, though, in this where you see Ted's stand-in very clearly. But they always reverse them, the opposites, so they don't have to, obviously, like, here's bad Ted, good Bill.
Yeah.
Bad Bill, good Ted.
Yes.
So they don't have to.
So they don't have to interact
two
with.
Keanu's, two Alex Winters.
Yeah.
And they have to green screen them against each other and look all ugly. And they just do that.
Yeah.
Perfect. It's fine.
It's a fine solution to that problem, but it also serves a visual purpose, which is one of the things I like about this movie, is how the first movie, it's fine, looks like a standard 80s movie. I think Bogus Journey is so much more creative visually, more inventive, both in terms of the ideas and the visuals. Bill and Ted, because the movie's called Bill and Ted, they're always Bill's on the left frame, Ted's on the right of frame. Almost as often as logically possible to do. So that's why, like, when they get out of the van, there's the evil robots to them. It's Bill on the left, Ted on the right. And then when you reverse that with the actual Bill and Ted, Bill on the left, Ted on the right.
You dick, Bill!
The director, this was his first movie, and you could tell he really put a lot of thought into it. Peter Hewitt's his name. Lots of scene transitions that are really interesting, I noticed. Like, they have the photo of the princesses, throw it onto a table, the camera starts spinning, and it dissolves to the wheel of the van spinning.
Yeah.
It's a very well-constructed movie from the visuals.
Yeah, yeah. And it's very 90s.
It's very 90s.
Especially the hell sequences.
Yeah, well, all of it's a lot more, the lenses and stuff are a lot, like, wide lenses, a lot more exaggerated. Yeah. And also a lot of thought put into the color of the color scheme of the whole movie. It's a lot more colorful. I mean, that opening, when they're in the future, and all those students are wearing these, like, day-glow pastel colors. It's very 90s.
Yeah,
it's supposed to be the future, but it looks like the 90s.
Say hello to an old friend, Thomas Edison.
Hello there.
And to help us on the musical side of things, Johann Sebastian Bach.
But they have a little, like, I don't know if it's a nod to the first one or we've got to do what the first one did, but they have the whole bit where Rufus brings in historical figures. So they have a new batch of historical figures, and they throw in one that we don't know, some girl from the 25th century. It was somebody.
Yeah.
Miss Pichelle, as you all know, was the inventor of the stationphonic oxygenetic amplifier graphophone reverberator. Kind of hard to imagine the world before we had them, isn't it?
I thought it was just a funny nod to the first one.
It's a funny nod to the first one. It's like, okay, that's it.
Yeah.
That's all we're going to do with historical figures and time travel. This has to do with heaven and hell. Bill and Ted.
Kill Bill and Ted in the first 20 minutes of the movie.
Yes. And we actually have a villain this time.
Yes, which is kind of a detriment because he barely factors into the movie.
No.
They set him up at the beginning. Yeah, he just kind
of
of gets the wheels in motion. But his name is Denomalous, which is the writer Ed Solomon's name, just spelled backwards. It's kind of fun, that villain, just because he's so serious throughout the whole movie and he feels completely out of place.
He comes in like Darth Vader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a very Darth Vader-esque entrance, almost a nod, because his stormtroopers barge in and then he's stomping, and then, oh gosh, George Carlin is very Obi-Wan-esque, and he calls him his former teacher.
Denomalos, my old teacher.
Rufus, my favorite pupil.
And then at the end of the film, we learn that he was his gym teacher. To which I LOL'd.
Yeah.
And then he builds two robot Bill and Teds, evil Bill and Ted, to go and kill Bill and Ted.
And he programs them to act just like Bill and Ted, so he's constantly annoyed by them because he hates Bill and Ted.
But like Ted pops his eyeball out, which is a camera, and then that's that wacky fisheye 90s, like, it's 90s all over the place. That's okay though. They paid a fortune to show the Gorn episode from Star Trek.
Yeah.
So they go to the Vasquez Rocks.
Well, that's a clever little bit. Yeah,
I like that. I like
the
that.
Gorn episode is on TV, which was shot at Vasquez Rocks, and then the robots take them to Vasquez Rocks, and they recreate that same snap zoom shot.
Well, and real quick, in addition to Vasquez Rocks, Bill and Ted University.
Oh, is that the Biodome location? The
Starfleet Command.
It's Biodome, starring Pauly Shore.
Well, no, beyond that, more famously, the Quigley Building. They're really using their Southern California locations, although I really don't know where that building is.
I wonder what that building is, just in general.
I think it's just an office building.
Just an office building?
Yeah, that someone designed to be futuristic. So yeah, they get murdered. They get thrown off Vasquez Rocks. They have no noticeable bodily injuries.
That's fine.
That's fine, because this is cartoony. And they wake up and they meet William Sadler.
No one has ever won.
Dude, we gotta ditch this guy. Definitely.
Gotta love him. Great performance.
Well, that's what I was gonna say is what elevates it, because we've talked about that before. The Chad Vader syndrome, where I want to say cheap comedy, it's easy comedy.
It's easy comedy, yeah.
But in the case of the Grim Reaper and Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, it's elevated, one, by his performance, but also he becomes like a real character. You learn that he's really like, he's a sore loser, he's insecure. There's so many times in the movie, like at the end when they build the good robots, and he's like, what about, I made the wigs, what about me?
Excellent work, dude.
What about me? I made the wigs.
Okay, Death.
I helped with shopping.
All right.
I was pushing the cart.
Again, because Bill and Ted are so likable and infectiously likable. Now the Grim Reaper, who is, trying to keep them in the afterlife forever, now he wants to be their friend. It's everything in these movies. It's like, it's dumb humor that's just slightly elevated to something a little more clever.
But his performance in this, with that weird Eastern European accent.
Indistinguishable accent.
Funny.
Yeah.
He's funny.
He's great. And it's also like an homage to Ingmar Bergman, the Seventh Seal.
Playing chess against death.
Yes.
You have sunk my battleship.
Excellent!
But again, that kind of heightened visual style of like, he has these like black circles around his eyes, and it's not like they're sunken in, it's just like a hard line of black around his eyes.
Because you don't want it to be too scary. It's a PG-13, Jay.
Yeah. They eliminate any chance of him being scary pretty early on.
But your shoes are untied.
I don't know exactly what a Melvin is. I guess it's like a wedgie, but in the front? Do you squeeze his balls?
I think so.
Okay.
I think that's a 90s thing.
Okay.
80s, 90s thing. There's a band called the Melvins.
There is, yeah.
And I don't know if that's associated with that. Like, this is a super dated reference.
Okay.
I think grabbing someone's balls and twisting them, instead of being laughably called a Melvin in the 80s, would now be a felonious hate crime.
Yeah, a sexual assault. A
sexual assault, and you'd end up in prison for the rest of your life nowadays. When in the 80s it was just, you gave me a Melvin. And
well, that's another one of the.
Now you get you get sent to the electric chair. So kids today don't know what that means.
Okay.
A noogie. When grabbing someone and doing this.
Yeah, that's still violent assault.
It's considered a felonious assault, punishable by up to 40 years in prison.
That's another one of the weird gay jokes in this movie. At the end, Death gives Denomalus a Melvin, and then Denomalus makes a little smile.
Denomalus has repressed homosexuality. That's why he's so angry.
Okay. So it's not a gay joke. It's just a backstory.
It's a backstory.
All
no
right.
Pun intended.
I hope this works. Work in The Exorcist 1 and 3.
Okay, one of the best scenes is when they go to the police briefing and Ted possesses his father.
My son, Ted Theodore Logan, and his friend, Bill S. Preston, Esquire, have been murdered and replaced by evil robots from the future.
I don't know who that actor is.
His name is Hal Landon. He was in Eraserhead, of all things, David Lynch's first feature film. And then he showed up in the Netflix Pee Wee Herman movie that came out a few years ago. And I don't know if he's ever been in anything else.
But he does a great impression of Keanu Reeves doing an impression of a moronic Southern California teenager.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
And then you got that other guy, character actor guy from Total Recall.
1 minute you'll be the savior of the rebel cause, and the next thing you know, you'll be Cohagen's bosom buddy. You'll even have fantasies about alien civilizations, as you requested, but in the end, back on Earth, you'll be lobotomized.
I totally believe you, dude.
Who does not do quite such a good job as Bill, but it's a fun
They gave him
scene.
less to do. They gave him less dialogue.
It's like all about these little set pieces. Like that scene's pointless, but it's fun.
Right.
Because you got these guys acting like Bill and Ted, the ghosts go in them, and then I guess Missy holds seances.
She said, it was like the 90s kind of new agey thing.
How's it going, New Age teens?
Well, that's funny too, is like they're clearly just green screen, just going, whoa! And it's the appropriate level of corny.
Yeah, and then Missy thinks they're evil spirits, so she casts them into hell.
Well, before they get to hell, this was the teaser trailer for the movie, that long scene where they're falling through this endless empty void, which might be my favorite scene in the movie.
That is funny, that is funny.
And that sums up Bill and Ted too, that scene, because obviously they're scared, they're yelling, and then after a while they get bored because it's just this endless pit. So they start playing like 20 questions, and they're making the best of it.
Dude, this is a totally deep hole. Yeah! Now what? Oh no.
But they fall into hell. They're on floating rocks.
It's very visual and cool.
Oh yeah,
look at that compared to
giant.
like the first movie.
Yeah.
It's so drastically different.
Yeah, and I love that the hallway in hell, this like rotting, rusting metallic hallway with all these doors of your own personal hell that you're trapped in.
And very low ceilings.
It's just short enough to make it annoying. It's just like production design-wise.
Yeah.
It's like perfect. It's not, and it makes it comical. It still adds that little edge of comedy. Because it kind of reminds me of like a Freddy Krueger. Like you have these like the Dutch angle moving camera back and forth, and it's like it's a little 90s, but it's a little like Freddy Krueger-ish, but in a way that low ceiling makes it funny as opposed to being too scary.
Right.
And I don't know why. It was just a brilliant little decision to make that ceiling just short enough to where it's annoying. And then,
well, that's the whole sequence. Has my favorite line in the movie, which is, "Dude, hell sucks."
Dude, what? Hell sucks! Definitely! No!
And they go to their own personal hells. Ted's is something with a Easter bunny.
You stole Deacon's Easter basket. No way.
Bill's hell, much better.
That Easter bunny's great, though.
Oh yeah, it's cool.
That's Kevin Yeager did all the effects for the movie, and it looks like he did a lot of the Chucky sequels. And you look at the face of that Easter bunny, and it just looks like Chucky.
Kevin Yeager, his father Chuck, is not proud. Bill's nightmare, or hell, eternal hell, is Grandma S. Preston Esquire.
Played by Alex Winter.
Is it?
Oh yeah, that's him, under heavy makeup.
Oh, of course, of course.
That's where you could really tell, because like the first movie, it was written by those two guys, and then it was made into a movie, and they cast it and everything. But you can tell with the second movie that Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves were kind of more involved creatively. And you can tell it was like a collaboration between the four of them, which is why I'm interested about the new one, because it's all of them together again. But Alex Winter, that's clearly like his idea to do something like that, because like he did his movie Freaked, where he's also got heavy prosthetics on, and it's a lot more of his sense of humor than the first movie is with stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, they show like the close-up of the granny, and she's got like whiskers
all
coming
the
out.
hair on her mouth. And
yeah.
Come here, give Granny a kiss. It's wonderful.
Yeah. And visually, both of those sequences, the Easter Bunny one and that, are really creative too. Yeah. Like there's that everything's like bathed in blue with
Tim
Granny.
Burton-y. It's that Tim Burton-esque pastel kind of weird warped 90s looking.
Yeah, distorted
like,
angles.
The Edward Scissorhands.
Yeah.
That modernish 1950s weird artistic look.
Whoa. Bogus.
Well, there's a cameo from our favorite friend, the Kurlan Neskar, as seen in hundreds of films.
I don't remember it, but I'm going to assume it's the part when evil Bill and Ted robots are destroying the apartment.
Hey, Evil Ted!
It happens in there like 2 or 3 times.
Okay. Those are fun little cutaways, the Bill and Ted evil robots.
Yeah.
They're fun because they act just like Bill and Ted, just mildly evil.
Aim for the cat, dude! Aim for the cat! I'm trying, Evil Ted! I'm trying! Ah, just missed!
They try to kill cats multiple times throughout the movie.
They're assholes. And I like that scene where they treat the princesses horribly.
Yeah.
And then they leave.
I don't understand what's come over you two.
Well, you see, we used to be pussweeds, but now we're metal. So get over here and put out!
They make Missy faint from evil death breath.
Catch you later, future wife. Whoa, evil breath!
Well, that was a post-production thing. They punched her out originally.
Oh.
Just punched her across the face, which is why her reaction is like she looks like she's been punched.
Oh.
But they're like, that might be a little too harsh. Let's just add a sound effect or add a voiceover of you saying, "Oh, evil breath."
Whoa, evil breath!
Because he punches her and then I think he goes to blow her over.
Oh.
So they cut out the punch, left in the blow.
Did you assume that the most brilliant scientist in the entire universe would be from Earth?
Well, we didn't even mention the aliens.
I wanted to ask you a question.
Yes.
Since you might know more about this than me.
Okay.
Station is a alien that's dead. Yeah. That's in heaven.
They go to heaven to find the most brilliant person in the universe to help them make robots.
Yes. And you got your Albert Einstein there, and Benjamin Franklin's there, and but there's these two weird aliens that they're called Station, and they're aliens that are super smart, that they want to. Death is going to help bring them back to Earth to build the robots.
Yeah.
So that the robots can punch the heads off the other robots.
That's like half of the movie is set up to defeat the evil robots, and all they do is punch their heads off.
Yep. Bill and Ted probably could have taken them out with a shotgun, maybe. But evil Bill and Ted earlier in the movie go like, Station.
Yeah.
Let's ditch the booth and start phase 2. Station.
What's that about?
Well, and the Faith No More guy at the beginning yells Station, too.
Station!
Well, it's sort of, I mean, the alien's name being Station is sort of an inside joke. Because the two guys that wrote the script, they had there's a couple scenes in the movie that take place at the police station, like when Ted's dad gets possessed. But there was apparently a scene that was written that they ended up deleting from the script, and they just copied the scene and deleted it. But the word station didn't get deleted, interior police station. And for some reason, they just thought it was funny that just the script was going on, and then it just said station, and then the script continued. So that's why the alien's name is Station. But why it's other people use it as some sort of form of expression, I don't know, other than they just think it sounds funny. It's the most inside joke that's ever been in a major motion picture. It makes no sense.
I officially like these guys. I get it.
Now it all makes sense.
Now it's all clear to me.
Okay.
It's as sloppy and loose as the movies themselves. I don't have to think.
There you go.
It's like, how do they fix that antenna with bubble gum? Who cares? Who cares?
Well, his name is Station, even though it's two aliens, because as we learned, he can combine into one big alien. Well, as we gear up towards the finale, the third act, it has the same problem that the first movie did, where the third act was kind of weak, so they reshot it.
Really?
The exact same problem, yeah.
What was the original third act?
Well, actually, a slightly different problem is that they were starting to go over budget, so they just started to rip stuff out of the third act of the script.
Oh, is that when we started to call it Bill and Ted's Omitted Journey?
I remember the day you did that. I remember the very day that you coined that phrase, Bill and Ted's Omitted Journey. Yeah,
we just get these pages that were blank.
Yeah, omit.
But when they're on their way to the Battle of the Bands, after the robots have been built, they get confronted in the middle of the street by the Hell visions. So the Easter Bunny, Granny, and Colonel Oates show back up. And there's this big car chase, but they're more heightened and exaggerated versions. Like the Easter Bunny is now 8 feet tall and has giant fangs, and they shot some of it, and then they were just what is this? We're over budget, we're running out of time, rip. So they cut all that out. But that was kind of a bigger part of the climax, because they confront their fears is the whole thing. And so at the end, when they give their big inspirational speech, where they're the best place to be is here, the best time to be is now, they go into that, talking about confronting your fears. And so it was all informed by that scene.
We don't need character development.
We don't need any of that stuff. Well, where we were talking about them getting kind of loosey-goosey with the rules at the end of this one.
Yeah.
Denomalus shows up, because they established in the first movie, we got to go back, once we're done with this, we got to go back in time and set things up.
After the report, we'll time travel back to 2 days ago, steal your dad's keys, and leave them here. That way, when we get here now, they'll be waiting for us. See?
So they do that a little bit, where Denomalus is I can do that too. I'm going to go back and set up another gun.
And another gun.
And then a gun just magically appears in his hand. It's that's not how this works.
I thought that was weird. It should have lowered in on strings.
Or it was hidden under a chair.
Yeah, pulls it out.
Yeah,
because it was set up that Bill and Ted set up his setups to trick him.
Right.
So how'd they make it appear
It gets very convoluted. Like I said, the third act is a little sloppy, but everything leading up to it is great.
Yeah, and that's all right that it's a little sloppy, because it's Bill and Ted.
Yeah. It's not like the third act of, we keep going back to the Future, but yeah.
Yeah.
The third act of Back to the Future is sloppy, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Third act of Bill and Ted movie is sloppy, it's part of its charm.
They're silly comedies.
Yeah.
They're silly comedies about silly characters.
Or at the end you have two little alien creatures playing bongos. Because these movies are liked well enough, but it's not like they're not Back to the Future, you know, they're not Indiana Jones, they're not like huge. They're like the little movies that could.
They're a lesser film franchise. Child's Play. It's not quite Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees. It's just your Child's Play.
Yeah. Still holds in there and keeps kicking.
Most people know what it is.
Yep.
But it's not your A-tier film franchise. So.
And we need those too.
After rewatching both of these movies, I'm very excited about Bill and Ted Face the Music.
I am, especially, I know they didn't plan it this way, but especially for it to come out like right now, a movie about two innocent, goofy, optimistic guys saving the world through positivity. I am very excited to watch that right now when the world's a fucking nightmare.
San Diego High School football room!